Hello and welcome to Eavesdropping at the Movies. I'm Mike.
And I'm José.
And we're watching a Netflix film today, The Old Guard.
Yes.
Made for Netflix, I think, with Netflix
Yes.
money. It's not just one that they've bought and
That's right.
distributed. It's their own film. It stars Charlize Theron and Chiwetel Ejiofor, lots of other actors that I haven't heard of. Matthias Schoenaerts is in there as well.
Yes, he is. He plays Booker.
It's directed by Gina Prince-bythewood, or Bythewood. I've never heard of her before.
No, I mean, I have heard of her, but I haven't seen any of her films.
She made Love and Basketball, The Secret Life of Bees, Beyond the Lights.
Yes. So The Secret Life of Bees and Love and Basketball got a real buzz a few years ago. So she's a name. And actually, on the basis of this film, I think, she's a director to reckon with, actually.
I didn't know anything about this film before we started, other than really that you wanted to watch it, and I'd seen, I think, one of the promotional shots of Charlize Theron from like the opening scene of the film in like a black tank top and sort of combat gear, and she's got a short haircut and shades, and she's got a gun maybe, and she's like ready to have a fight, right? And I was like, oh, this is one of José's. He loves Charlize Theron as an action hero.
Yeah.
I didn't know anything else, and if you don't know anything else, spoilers will be coming up. It turns out this is based on a comic book that I'd never heard of.
Yes.
And this is actually a kind of superhero team type of movie.
Yes.
In a sense. So the way the film introduces this is the film starts off with her and her team, which seem to be a kind of special ops team at the start, taking on a job which is given to them by Chiwetel Ejiofor, who's a CIA guy, to rescue some hostages from being kept captive in a school somewhere.
Yes.
And when they get there, it turns out it's a setup, and a load of soldiers in there fire on them, kill them. It's just a firing squad. And they're done for, and then they get up, and you go, oh, right, they're zombies or something. And it turns out these are undead people.
They're immortal.
They're immortals. They all come from different eras, so like the most recent one comes from about 200 years ago, but the oldest one, which is Charlize Theron, comes from eras ago.
Yeah. And
at some point, they lose their immortality, but they have they have these healing factors.
There are a couple of more rules.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that I want to mention. So the thing is that they are immortal, but they can die. So, and that's not necessarily a contradiction. They just, everything that's alive dies, they say. So the difference between them and us is, that instead of, dying like at 60 or whatever, they can live for thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Mm-hmm. But sometimes when they're killed, they don't get up, and it's happened before, and they don't know when that happens, right?
Yeah.
So, so immortal in quotation marks. Yeah, they live for really long times, but they can also die.
They also don't know why they're immortal to begin with.
That's right.
It's something they discover about themselves. And one of the characters here, a little bit like we were talking about Inception, how the Ariadne character is there to introduce you to the rest of the rules in the film. You have a character here who has some of that function.
Yeah.
This young black girl who's in the army who gets killed and then wakes up. So she doesn't know why she's immortal. She's very, very confused. She's picked up by the rest of the guys who sense where she is. They have some sort of telepathic connection with her. Mm. And she has to learn that we don't know why this happens, but this is who you are.
Yeah.
And one of the questions they always ask about themselves is, why me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Another of the rules is that they dream each other. They have like this bond. So when one of them is born, in quotation marks, the other sense it, right? But obviously they can only sense those that are born while they are already immortal, not those who, were born before them, yeah? So there's a kind of a difference in knowledges, yeah, that kind of occurs in relation to when a person became immortal. And basically, Andromache is the eldest, so like 6,000 or 7,000 years before that. Two of them, Joe and Nikki, met in the Crusades, and one is an Italian and the other one is a Turk. Yeah, so got an interesting mix there of, Muslims. The very newest recruit is Kiki Lane, as now Freeman, and, she is just born as the film begins. And then you also have the Booker character who fought with Napoleon, so he's the youngest next to Nile, yeah? I mean, just basically like, 200 years old, yeah.
A mere 200 years old.
Yeah, a mere 200 years old. So the film's got a very interesting setup, yeah? And actually one of the things, I've been reading the comic book because I was so entranced by the film, and that, you know, it led me to the comic book. And the comic book is fascinating because, amongst other things, it's a kind of a serious work, you know? So each episode of the second series, you know, begins with a quote from, you know, Arthur Miller or Oscar Wilde or John le Carré, right? You know, that kind of is a quote on the themes of the series, right? You know, this is an action film that also has intellectual ambitions, yeah, that kind of...
Well, that doesn't happen in the film.
No, it doesn't happen in the film. But I'm just saying that it's a work that has kind of...
So tell me about the comic, because I've not read any of it. Is it more of a graphic novel, or is it like a weekly series?
Well, I mean, it's a graphic novel in the sense, but it's released as individual episodes. So something like, I think, you know... Well, I've only read up to number 5 of the second series, so I don't know. Right?
How many were in the first series?
I think there's about 10.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and then... It's all the narrative is already charted, so there are only 3 series, and then that will be it. Yeah.
Okay.
But the reason why I wanted to talk to you about it is because, I was gobsmacked that a work like this was commissioned and shown on Netflix. It's entirely the kind of, you know, big budget action spectacle film that you would expect to see at a Cineplex. Yeah. Don't you think?
No.
Ah, okay. Well, we'll discuss that.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. Do you remember when we saw Stranger on the Third Floor, which you'd never seen before and I had? And you spent the first 20, 30 minutes going, why did Mike want to see this? Because it was rubbish. And then it changed. And that's rather like my experience with The Old Guard. I mean, I wasn't blown away when it changed, but for the first 40 minutes, I was thinking, why on earth did Jose want to see this? Because I'd seen some shite on Netflix, and this was just like it, I thought. Despite the fact it had a huge star in it, I thought before it got to... I'll tell you when it changed, is when it was revealed that the 2 Crusade characters were gay.
Yes, and that's a fantastic moment.
Deeply in love with each other, and that's when... I wasn't just because they were gay that I thought, oh, I'm getting into it, but, you know, that was interesting, and then things started to change around the point, and I suppose I got into the swing of things, and the film had started to explain itself a bit more. But up until then, I thought, this is just something that thinks it's cool, doesn't look all that appealing, frankly. I wasn't that keen on the aesthetic, I wasn't that keen on the action, and there was something in the way the characters spoke that was kind of, because they knew things I didn't. And obviously you expect that to a point, and you have to give the film time to develop and, you know, kind of tell its story the way it wants. But, you know, it reminded me of like the start of Jessica Jones, was it? The Marvel thing that was on Netflix, where, you know, the first episode or 2 of that is all characters going, oh, he's back, and you're like, who's he? And it's just, say what you mean. Like, up to a point, I need to know. I felt this film was doing some of that.
Okay, well, let me begin by disputing it before I forget all the things that you mentioned.
Yeah.
You know, so the first thing, I found it very exciting. You know, I found that sequence where they go rescue young girls who've been abducted in a slavery ring. That's what brings them to that first action, right? And then they all get shot, and they get up. That instantly got my attention. Yeah. You know, because then you want to find out what powers do they have? What is this about? So, and I absolutely love the action sequences, actually, in this film. Yeah, I think they're brilliant. You see the action completed. You see the interplay between people doing the action. You know, so you know, one character hits somebody, hands the gun to the other then shoots somebody else. Like, you know, it's absolutely brilliantly choreographed, and actually I found it really exciting. Yeah. So those things, in combination with the budget, in combination with Charlize Theron, I think this is a film that I would have expected to see in the cinema. And it's interesting.
$70 million budget, bloody hell.
Yeah. So, and it's understandable. You see the budget, you know.
Yeah.
So I think it's very interesting that even this type of, you know, action spectacle film based on comic books, it's almost like, you know, the last things that are available to see on a Cineplex, and now they're being taken, you know, you're seeing them on Netflix. I think that's interesting.
Well, I don't know. I think some of it made sense to me in terms of like, this is actually the kind of thing Netflix would do, and like I said, so just to finish the point about, the first 40 minutes did not grab me. I just thought there are films that I've seen on Netflix that are Netflix productions, and some that I think have just been bought by Netflix and went nowhere else. Like there's one called The Circle. There was a film called Arc, ARQ, which was this sci-fi. I'm always interested in the way they do the sci-fis because there might be good ideas in them, but they are always so cheap and rubbish on Netflix. And I thought, and this looked a lot like one of those.
Well, you see, I kind of, I mean, my marker of that is, what is the latest Chris, the Australian blonde, Thor,
Hemsworth.
Yeah. The latest film that he did for Netflix is kind of what you're accusing this of being.
Right.
But I just thought it was trash.
What was it?
It's about, a young kid is kidnapped in India, and Chris Hemsworth is sent to extract him.
It wasn't that Six Underground, was it?
Might be.
Wasn't that Michael Bay?
Yeah, well, it was one of those guys, yes. And it was complete rubbish.
Extraction?
Extraction, that's it.
Directed by Sam Hargrave, produced by the Russos, who are Avengers guys.
Yeah, I think, that is exactly the kind of action film that I hate. It's all like explosions.
Yeah.
But again, that big budget, big star, action spectacle film, and it's on Netflix. So, but I think the old guard is doing some much more interesting things.
It is. For my money, after a while, but it is. So, like I say, it gets to the point where they've rescued the new girl, Niall, and rescued in her terms. She's been kidnapped, but they've got her. She's now part of the team, and you're starting to learn about who they are and why they're immortal, or how they operate. And as part of it, you learn that these two characters are gay and in love with each other, and this is what kind of made me think, this is more interesting than I first thought.
I mean, that's an incredible declaration of love, actually. And as Andy Griffith pointed out, what's even more incredible is that they make it with all the guns pointed at them, and then the scene has a rhythm, so that it has like a rhythmic punctuation, i.e. all of these armed men with all their masks and everything separate them, right? And the cut or the move is just like this wonderful punctuation mark on their kiss. It's really visually really well done.
The declaration comes a little after this.
Right.
I'm talking about the way you actually just first learn.
Okay.
The declaration I did think was really sweet.
Yes.
And quite powerful, and it really has that feeling of. It made me think of all those images of minorities, persecuted people being persecuted by the police.
Yes.
So what they are in this scene is like it's in microcosm. These two guys are surrounded by police, pointing guns at them. Or maybe they're not police, maybe they're military, but same difference.
Yes.
It makes you think of all that imagery, and it's this defiant declaration and kiss in the middle of it. It's really powerful.
Yes. I was thinking of doing a little gif of it, saying "now in Poland."
Although there was a bit of bad grammar in it, which I didn't like. But
I mean, it's not as powerful as the Wachowski's Cloud Atlas, that moment in the Oxford spires.
Oh yeah.
So it's not as beautifully filmed.
It's not as romantically powerful, but it's more defiant. Because they're not fighting anyone up the top of that that building. Like they're right in front of the police here.
It's powerful. I suppose I'm trying to make a distinction between, what I think is a really great moment, done with great skill and sensitivity and nuance, and something that is very effective and it's quite powerful, actually, I found, but it's maybe not at the level of that moment.
But it also kind of made me think, well, this is actually why this makes sense on Netflix, and why Netflix I think is the place I would expect this, if I would expect it anywhere, because the kind of openness and freedom, for want of better terms, of the representation here are A, very powerful, but B, something that I think companies would be scared of being so bold about in the cinema. Think how long it's taken for Marvel to put a woman at the centre of their films, that sort of thing.
That's a very interesting way of looking at it, and actually almost the opposite of what I would have thought, but I think you're right. Right, so, historically, film has always been a place that's been more open to complex ideas than television, right? That was kind of, part of the way that cinema survived is by increasing the range of representation that was then available on television. And now Netflix has done the opposite. I mean, there are kind of, the range of representation available on Netflix is much wider than what's available on cinema, because cinema is so capital intensive. It's such a risky investment. They're really afraid of alienating anybody, right? Which obviously kind of means that,
Whereas Netflix, in some regard, certainly in film, I think is still sort of the scrappy, not underdog, but upstart. The guy looking for attention. By way of analogy, consider the Taskmaster on TV, which was on Dave. It's now moved to Channel 4. It's a panel show where instead of it being like Would I Lie to You or Have I Got News for You, where you have different contestants every week, you have the same contestants for an entire series. And when they took it to the BBC and to Channel 4 and various places, they went, no, we don't want to see this. Like, what is it, a sitcom? Like, you want to see different people every week. Dave looked at it, which is this, kind of smaller channel that's looking for original stuff, and they thought other people wouldn't do this. This sets us apart. And sure. Taskmaster it's become one of the biggest things on TV. I think that's analogous to what's going on here. Other people wouldn't do this, Netflix says. We will.
Well, as I said, I would have thought the opposite, but I've come around to your point of view. I mean, the evidence supports your point of view. Though, calling Netflix an upstart.
Upstart. I still think in terms of cinema, I still think they are the thing of, they're still looking for the Oscars and they're still looking for all that kind of acclaim. So in terms of film, they're still not, I think. Actually, interestingly, you think they would have become even more so, because they were growing in terms of their film productions. And you would have thought that since coronavirus has been here for 5 or 6 months and cinemas have been closed, they would have really taken over in that respect, and they don't seem to have.
Anyway, I think they have. I mean, their viewing figures have mushroomed.
Sure.
So,
but culturally, the conversation still isn't really about them.
I think also it's the way that the conversation is led. So another reason why I wanted to do a podcast on this film is because only a few years ago this would have been considered absolutely radical. Not just the declaration of love, between this gay couple, which is a central thing. It's, one of the central emotive things in the film, but also it's directed by a woman. It has kind of this incredible cross-cultural casting, right? So, you have a Muslim and you have a Christian, a Turk and an Italian, and the FBI guy is black. There's the main relationship is between the Charlize Theron character and the young black woman. What's her, Kiki? Yeah, Kiki Lane, Niall Friedman, right? So, kind of they are in a way the central relationship where the leader and the leader to be, is a young black woman and, an older white woman. The center of the story is Andromache, yeah?
Andromache.
Andromache
of Scythia, is it?
Yeah. So, you have...
I'm glad I had subtitles on for that, I must say, when it came up.
You have Charlize Theron, who is, what now? Like, she's close to 50, 45 or something. Leading an action film like this, right? That in itself is something. And actually, it turns out that she's at least non-binary, right? So, the big love of her life is another woman, Norika, who's introduced at the end of the show. So, to have, like... I hesitate to say lesbian because you're also told, that she's had lots of affairs with men, but they die, right? Mm. Yeah, but for thousands of years, the love of her life is this woman, right? I mean that's actually amazing in a movie or a...
Yeah, well, when I said these two characters, the guys from the Crusades, are gay, I mean, just saying that feels so reductive. And in that speech... that he gives, talking about how much he loves him. The policeman says, "What is it, your boyfriend?" And he goes, "You're such a child. He's so much more to me than that." And he's like, "Yeah, this is the film asserting that it is more than that. Like, love is so much deeper and all these." And actually, that's why it feels so reductive to say, "Oh, they're gay." Yeah. Like, they are.
Yes. Well,
but you don't know that that's all they are. And actually, the point is that this particular love transcends the labels.
Well, or it's the same as. I mean, it's just making an equivalence, right?
Yeah.
It's. about the depth of a love rather than the social sexual orientation it takes.
Yes,
or
totally.
who the sexual object is. But I think they are gay, right? Like you're not told or shown anything else.
Oh yeah. Like they're not gay, but
Yeah.
the film is also doing something about, like I say, I think the idea of it trying to transcend the label is...
Well, try to show people that, kind of being gay is about feeling rather than just sex.
Yeah.
Right? But the Charlize Theron character is different because you are told that she's had affairs with men.
Yeah.
Right? So that's why I'm hesitating, lesbian, non-binary. On the other hand, like her main relationship and the love of her life is this woman. I think that's quite amazing to have in a $70 million production, whether for Netflix or for something else. So I think this film that's directed by a woman, a black woman that has multiracial casting, that its lead heroine is non-binary and also, in film terms, relatively old. Yeah. Those are all amazing things. So I feel this film hasn't gotten enough attention, really, and it certainly hasn't gotten attention where you would expect to get it from. Yeah, you'd expect feminist film historians to be kind of super excited about it, and I haven't read anything that isn't just from the normal sources.
Yeah, it reminded me of The Darkest Minds, which, if you remember, was the young adult superhero thing we saw about all kids in America develop superhero powers at a young age, and then they're kind of rounded up into camps, and the film follows a few teens who are free and out on the loose and looking for a safe haven. It reminds me of that because I remember essentially liking the film, although I don't think I did very much at first, but then you sort of talked me around as to why it was interesting, and it was to do with things like representation. And the fact that, I just overlooked sort of the fact that a young black girl at the centre of this superhero film, which is effectively what it was, is an interesting thing.
Yes.
And actually not to be taken for granted.
In this film.
Yes. I think it's something we took for granted in the animated Spider-Man film as well, Into the Spider-Verse.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think we really gave it its due that actually putting a black kid at the centre is not nothing.
Yeah.
But the other reason I think it made me think of The Darkest Minds is that Darkest Minds felt like something of a trifle, in a way. Like, actually, all those things were very interesting and very heartfelt, and by the end it was tragic, that film. But there was something that still felt sort of insubstantial about the film overall. I can't quite put my finger on it. And there's something about this that does it too. And maybe it's actually maybe it's a bias in that this doesn't come from a source that I'm aware of. Whereas actually, like, if Marvel weren't so huge already, and if DC weren't so huge already, I wouldn't think that Batman and Iron Man and all the rest, and Spider-Man, are great, or as great as I think they are. So maybe it's just a bias that I didn't come to this with any particular knowledge. Mind you, I never came to Iron Man with any knowledge, and I loved that from the beginning, so I don't know. And maybe it's just a bias that, like, I need to look at new things with more open eyes, maybe.
I don't know, I love it. I don't think it's a great masterpiece of the cinema, obviously, but I think it's a really terrific, action film, and I enjoyed it hugely, and I was moved by elements of it. Actually, that declaration of love, I loved it so much that actually I excerpted it and made a clip of it and recirculated it so other people would see it, right? I mean, it's very rare that a film gets me so excited as to, try to push those things about it.
Yeah.
And also what I really love about the film, and unlike my criticism of Batman, is that it's transnational, that it doesn't feel American. And there's no reason for it to feel American. Kind of the protagonists are from different places in the world, and so on. And it gives the film a different feel. There's a respect for knowledge and culture and science and learning, and that you actually want. I'm sure we will see it again in American cinema, but lately it's been like a pet peeve of mine that those things are not there. And you see it here. So, and of course it's not a problem in this film because actually none of the protagonists are meant to be American except one.
Yeah.
So,
although Andromache of Scythia sounds quite American. She doesn't sound all that Greek. But yeah, exactly. They're from all over. And and it has that kind of globe-trotting feel that I really like. It actually makes me think of something like James Bond.
Yeah, a little bit. In that sense that Bond travels the world.
Or Mission Impossible has that feel to it.
It does have a Eurocentric bias, right? Because I think Norika is the only one who comes from the East. There's no Africans, or there's black people, but there's no Africans, which actually is surprising because kind of, I don't know, at least the African lore that I'm familiar with would very much lend itself to an immortal, and goddess worshipping and all that stuff that Andromache has experienced. So
there's room for a sequel.
Yeah, there is.
And the film clearly is looking for a sequel. I mean, it sets up a cliffhanger. Well, it maybe even wants a universe.
Yes. Well, exactly. I mean, I think that's also what's so exciting about this film to me, because when you were saying about Iron Man and so on, you might not be familiar with Iron Man, but you're familiar with the Marvel universe, or certainly anybody of my generation would have been, right? And then once you set up that universe, it's very easy to kind of bring in other things into it and bring in relations within it. They've already all been worked out. This is something new, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, I think the comic book only came out in 2017.
Right.
Right. So, I think it's kind of exciting and worth highlighting.
I felt a bit cynical about that prospect towards the end, but maybe, I mean, I'm just cynical about all things Netflix, and actually there's something quite exciting about this story continuing and these representations.
Yes.
Being and the idea that they should bring in someone African. That'd be great. Someone Japanese. Just start bringing in people from all over the shop. Why not? Maybe some Aboriginal sort of warlord from Australia. Why not?
You could
Native
see,
American.
You could see how this universe could develop. On the other hand, they've said that they would only do 3 series, and that would be it.
Yeah. Well, I mean,
3 series.
But Netflix will do as many films as they want, won't they?
Well, I suppose they buy the rights, don't they, to the world, not just to the story. Though that depends on what contract the writers and illustrators sign.
I mean, Homeland was based on a Israeli TV series that had 1 series, I think, and they got 7 out of it in America. It's like, you buy it for the start, and then you go off and do your thing.
Well, I mean, to tell the truth, I'm very excited about seeing what they come up with next, and I was very excited to see Charlize Theron in this role. I think she's terrific in this kind of movie, actually. So I think it's a terrific film. That does something that actually feels fresh and new, with, I think, marvelous action set pieces, and people with characters that you're not normally used to seeing together in a frame.
Do you think you would have been excited had you seen it in a cinema? I don't. I thought about this quite consciously, and I thought this visually, stylistically, this isn't interesting enough. Aesthetically, there's nothing really.
Well, I mean,
interesting about
I
this.
have no way of knowing, and. My reason for seeing films first in the cinema is to avoid precisely that kind of question, because there's no way of knowing, right? And actually, even now, if this were showing in a cinema and we go to it, I'd still have imprinted in my mind my first experience of it. So already it wouldn't be, a fresh view of it. I mean, I've had films ruined like that. So. There's just no way of knowing it. I mean, the only thing that I can tell you is that seeing it on a smaller screen is, whatever people say, a disadvantage. If you're looking at visuals.
It did feel built for the smaller screen. I mean, I wouldn't go as far as to say it just felt plain televisual, because I think it's better than that, and it's more expressive than that and more involved than that. But still, there's a huge amount of focus on close up, cutting back to the things to make sure you can kind of very clearly see just faces, and actually. There's less room, or at least it feels like there's less room in its aesthetic sort of principles for expression than I would have liked.
Well, I'm sure you're right, because it was made for a television screen.
Yeah, exactly.
But I think it worked very well that way, and you got a lot more full-bodied action than you actually get on an IMAX screen with a Christopher Nolan film.
To some degree.
So, shall we wrap it up?
I wasn't keen about some of that action though.
I loved.
There was the odd shot that I liked. There was when Charlize Theron beats up several soldiers in the dark in the cathedral. There was a kind of single take thing going on in there that I quite liked, but some of it was a bit near.
I loved all of it. I loved her going through the corridor. You know who she was up against. You knew what she had to do to survive it. You didn't quite know what she would how she would do it, you know, but your whole geography was like really clear. And as I said, the interplay between the characters was very clear. Where the hero stood in relation to the antagonist was really clear. You know, you also know that they have to avoid being dead for more than a few minutes because they're coming. So, you know, how that was choreographed in terms of doors and so on was, I thought, brilliant. You know, I mean, my God. Yeah, in comparison to that junk Chris Hemsworth film, or like I said, the Christopher Nolan films that we've been seeing, you know, where kind of, you know, the action is conveyed through sound. I mean, really, this is, to me, was wonderful.
Yeah, I think we can sometimes overstate the importance of the sort of clarity of geography, because it can be important, but sometimes it can also make things really sterile. And
well, it's not sterile here.
I felt some of it really was. Yeah.
But we have to disagree on that.
Yeah, we do. And I mean, I really do think that those first 40 minutes, I thought, God, this is terrible. It wants to be cool. It wants me to not know what's going on. It wants to surprise me. All that stuff that they didn't season 8 of Game of Thrones, where it was like subvert everyone's expectations, surprise them, and it was just shit. And then eventually it turned into something interesting. But I do still think ultimately this is kind of a trifle, and that it's. And that it makes sense that it's on Netflix because
the trifles is all they do.
Yeah.
Well, I disagree.
And because Netflix is, in some respects, kind of just a content factory that just puts out countless things, and if one of them hits, it's fine, and if 1,000 don't, well, the one of them did.
I think this is a really exciting mainstream queer film that's action-packed and glossy and glamorous and with, you know, great action, and that it hasn't gotten the attention it deserves.
Fair enough.
Thank you very much for listening. We are eavesdropping at the movies, and we are on
Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, and YouTube. On social media, we're on Facebook and Twitter, and the website is eavesdroppingatthemovies.com.
Thank you for listening.
Bye-bye.